Get started. So hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Yvonne Ritchie. I'm an advisor with the capacity development team for the Growing Canada's Community Canopies initiative with the Green Municipal Fund. And throughout the year, we host webinars on a variety of topics related to our programs, including our focus today on urban forestry. Through these webinars, we endeavor to bring you inspiring stories and best practices from communities across Canada who are advancing sustainability in their projects and practices. I'm excited to welcome you to our webinar today on developing an urban forest management plan for your community. And we've got a lot to cover today, so I'm going to go ahead and jump us right in. Rita, would you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So just a couple quick housekeeping items before we start. Today's event is taking place in English, but we do have French interpretation available. If you'd like to join the French interpretation, you can click it's either a little globe icon at the bottom of your screen or potentially under More, and you can use that to access the French channel. Aujourd'hui, notre événement aura lieu en anglais. Alors, si vous souhaitez écouter en français, veuillez cliquer sur le bouton d'interprétation qui est en bas de votre écran et sélectionner l'option française. Our webinar today is going to be in the form of a panel with time at the end for audience Q&A. So if you have questions for our panelists, I invite you to submit them in the Q&A box, and we'll be able to address those during the Q&A period. But you're also welcome to use the chat function, as I see some folks already are. If there's anything you want to comment on as we go along, if you'd like to introduce yourself, you're welcome to do that through the chat as well. A note as well that we are recording. I saw there was a question about that. So yes, we will have a recording available for folks to access later. I'd like to start the webinar off as well by acknowledging that I'm joining you from my home in Pêhtâkwan, also known as Halifax, on the unceded and traditional territories of the Mi'kmaq peoples, and part of the Wabanaki Forest region. FCM is also, our head offices are based in Ottawa, so we recognize the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people as the traditional custodians of the land upon which our offices are located. As we begin a conversation today that centers around urban forestry, our relationships to the land and the forests, I want to honor and recognize the teachings and practices of Indigenous elders, youth, knowledge keepers, and other Indigenous community members who for centuries have acted as stewards and caretakers of the forests, lakes, rivers, and other natural spaces of what we now call Canada. Since I was young, I've always found time in nature to be very restorative, physically, mentally, emotionally, and I have many favorite childhood memories of spending time hiking or camping in the woods on Indigenous lands. So I offer my gratitude to those who have come before me in caring for our forests and who continue to do so today. I also want to share an example of how forests can be spaces of healing, connection, and learning for Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities alike. The National Healing Forest Initiative, if you're not familiar with it, is a way that communities across Canada can create green spaces that honor residential school victims, survivors, and their families, and offer places of healing, of education, and of understanding in the spirit of reconciliation. So we pasted a link to that in the chat. I'd encourage you to read more about this initiative, look at some of the examples of different projects across Canada, and perhaps you can draw some inspiration of things that you might be able to implement or partner on in your own community. Today's webinar is being offered through GMF's Growing Canada's Community Canopies, or GCCC initiative, which is a relatively new program that launched last year to support communities in growing and managing their urban forests in a way that promotes equity and resilience to climate change. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about funding today, so just a quick disclaimer up front about that. But I will remind everyone that we have a call for applications right now that's open for tree planting funding. Your municipality can receive up to $10 million over the life of the program until 2031 to support planting across your community. And our current funding call is open until September 18th. If you do have questions related to funding, my colleagues from the outreach team, I believe, are also online and will be happy to reply in the chat or to give you a follow-up contact if you would like to discuss in more detail. Additionally, and most relevant for the topic of the webinar today, we are also planning to offer funding for strategic urban forestry work, including plans and studies, which will be launching later this year. This will include support for urban forest management plans, which is, of course, what we're talking about today. So I don't have a specific date to provide to you, but you can sign up for our newsletter, FCM Connect, and keep an eye on our website for more specific details on available funding as it launches. And lastly, apart from funding, just wanted to mention as well that we do offer capacity development support, which is offered in partnership with Tree Canada, our partner. So learning activities like this webinar are part of that, but we also have coaching support offered through the program for all of our funding applicants, and then that gives you the opportunity to connect with urban forestry experts across Canada to support you in developing your projects. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so for today's webinar, we actually have a guest moderator for today, and so I'm excited to welcome Jade Schofield to the virtual floor to lead us through a conversation on urban forest management plans. Jade is the president of the Ontario Urban Forest Council, the founder of Climate Compass Advisors, where she supports inclusive, community-driven climate action. She also serves as Senior Manager of Environment and Climate at Ontario Power Generation, leading their climate and biodiversity programs. She has contributed to over 30 municipal climate plans across Canada, spent 12 years in municipal government leading sustainability, and previously worked at the Eden Project in the UK. She also, when she's has the free time, I guess, sits on the Ontario Biodiversity Council, volunteers with Forest Canada, and teaches carbon accounting at the University of Waterloo. And Jade is one of the coaches that we are working with through the GCCC initiative. So Jade, I'm happy to hand things over to you and looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much, Vaughan. It's been an absolute pleasure being able to bring forward this webinar for everyone on the call today. And excited to be jumping in with our really impressive panelists of speakers, but want to just highlight a couple of our key objectives for today. As Yvonne highlighted, we're not going to be diving deep into the funding side, but we're really going to be talking holistically what the benefits an urban forest management plan can offer your community, what makes those plans strong, not only at the development stage, but all the way through implementation. So talking about community engagement, embedding equity, and some of those other co-benefits that come along that development journey. And of course, looking at how we can tailor these plans to suit the specific needs and strengths of your community, and also ensure that you're taking advantage of those co-benefits such as community well-being and resilience to climate change. So we're going to launch a quick poll, recognizing that folks on the call may be in different spaces along the journey. It's just popped up there. So if you could just take a moment, we'd love to get a sense of where is your community currently as it relates to its forest management journey. We recognize that this might be the first conversation you're having. Maybe folks are advocating to secure some funding to move forward with an initiative, or maybe folks have a plan in place. Maybe it's well and truly in implementation, or you're looking to do an update. So love for you to give us a little ranking. Okay, great. Excellent. So this is where I would encourage you to introduce yourselves to the chat as well, because one of the greatest strengths of these types of webinars is finding out who is who, and finding out who those advanced folks are and trying to connect them with those perhaps at the beginning side of that journey. That's fabulous. So we definitely have a good mix. So I'm going to we can end that poll and we'll move into the next slide. We can share those results as well for the folks. We also would encourage you, please hang on to the end, but if you don't have the time, take a quick screenshot of the QR code. We really would love to know, get some feedback on from you. So, and what the next steps are. So please take a moment to scan this QR code and answer a few brief questions. And I'm just going to clear the polls and quizzes from in front of me. That's fabulous. And we'll jump into the next slide, please. All right, well, we're going to jump right into it. As mentioned, we have a really exciting range of panelist speakers today. We have Miles Peart, who is the manager of urban forestry with the Parks and Forestry Horticulture Operations Department. Wow, that's a long department title over at the city of Vaughan here in Ontario. We also have Jeff Boone, who is the project manager for the city of Saskatoon. And we have Peyton Meters, who is the engagement manager for pipikwan, pêhtâkwan, who has supported a range of the development of urban forest management plans as well. I'm going to do a high-level read-through of their bios. It's quite impressive. But Miles is, as mentioned, is the manager of urban forestry with the city of Vaughan. He is a graduate of urban arboriculture programs at both Humber College and the Davey Institute of Tree Science and is an ISA certified arborist. He has a background in business management in the urban forestry sector and has led numerous forestry projects, such as the city's first ever urban forest management plan. Miles focuses on innovative customer service, has led Vaughan's Forestry to receiving the EA Danby Award for Outstanding Achievement in Municipal Administration in 2022, as well as the Willis Award for Innovation from the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrations in 2024. Next up is we have Jeff. Jeff is a graduate from the University of Toronto's forestry program. He has worked in urban forestry since 2006 with a strong foundation in forest entomology and forest ecology. He brings a science-based approach in his role implementing the urban forest management plan for the city of Saskatoon. Jeff is passionate about building a greener, more resilient Saskatoon through stronger tree protection policies, diverse and equitable planting strategies, and consistent cyclical maintenance. He is particularly focused on addressing the growing threat of Dutch elm disease in a city heavily reliant on American elm. And outside of work, Jeff enjoys exploring Saskatchewan's boreal forest, learning about natural history, especially insects, and sharing his love of nature with his daughter. And last but not least, we have Peyton, who was born in Newfoundland and comes from Mi'kmaq, French, and Irish ancestors. Peyton originally received her social work credential from MacEwan University, but to decolonize her practice, she redid her degree at a sovereign institute, Yellowhead Tribal College. As an environmental social worker, they use their gift of storytelling to connect people with abstract concepts in a way everyone can engage. And at McMaster Indigenous Research Institute, Peyton's master's level research project practice storytelling as a I'm going to get this word wrong, a pedagogical approach for environmental social work. Peyton has worked at pipikwan, pêhtâkwan for the past 3 years and is enjoying her role of engagement manager. So if everyone's got their cameras on, we can see everyone's lovely faces. We're going to jump right into it. We have a suite of questions that we're going to ask our panelists. And this is going to take us up to about 15 minutes before the end of the webinar. In the meantime, I encourage participants on the line to please drop your questions in the Q&A function. We will get to them at the end. I think you can use your upvoting and all that fun thing as well, so we can get to those at the end. All right, so folks, we're going to press go. I've got a first question for you. And Miles, I'm going to start with you. Can you share a little bit about your experience developing or implementing an urban forest management plan? And what was the context and what role did you play?
Absolutely. And good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Jade, and everybody for inviting us here today. So at the city of Vaughan, my role here is the manager of urban forestry. And right when I first started back in 2021, there happened to be some budget for a urban forest management plan in place, but no work had been done to advance the initiative really at all. So I was lucky enough to start out with the budget, and we got the thing off the ground. We put together the RFP for some consultants to come on and help us out, and we got to work on rolling up our sleeves and developing Vaughan's first urban forest management plan. It was quite a journey. I was the project lead from start to finish on the Vaughan side of it, working very closely with our wonderful consulting team. And we went through all the public engagement and stakeholder engagement across the board with everybody. And, took a couple years, but we got it endorsed by Vaughan City Council just last spring, actually. So we are just gearing up to give our first annual update on the progress we've made on the implementation. So I've gone from no plan to just getting started on the journey of actually implementing it.
Fabulous. Congratulations. Jeff, I'd love to pass the same question over to you if I could.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Jade. And I echo the sentiments. I'm very pleased to be invited on this panel today and talk about our urban forest management plan. For me, I became the full-time project manager for the plan in 2022. It was approved in 2021 by our council, but I've been with the city since 2008, so had a whole weaving role with respect to development of the plan. We developed it mostly internally, but we did hire a couple of consultants to specialize on, like, in particular areas, one being tree protection and the other being our canopy targets and canopy goals, and kind of a state of that we built that. Combined those consultant reports along with our own engagement to make our UFMP, and then subsequently created an implementation plan. And that in many ways is the document that I follow like day to day that shows me exactly how to make this UFMP happen. So that's kind of our Saskatoon perspective.
That's fabulous. Sounds like quite a journey to get where you are today, but it's progressing quite rapidly. And Peyton, you bring a slightly different context, in terms of perspective of working within forest management plans. Would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Gwe. Alab Jasi, Nita Luisi, Muxana Muxit, Galahwecheesk. My name's Peyton, and I come from Con River First Nation on my dad's side. And like my bio said, my mom is a French immigrant. And so I have both of those identities, but I find myself today actually living in Treaty 8 territory, Métis District 13 here in Grand Prairie. And pipikwan pêhtâkwan is an Indigenous public relations and engagement agency. So we are not urban forest planners, but we are humbly leaders in our field of engagement. And we work really closely with our kin and partners across Turtle Island to do engagements for the urban forest plans that you may be developing. And we've partnered over the last 2 years with Diamond Head Consulting, and we've worked on multiple urban forest plans across from Halifax to Fort Saskatchewan, and then even City of Edmonton we're working on now. So we've worked on many of them. I come from that lens of environmental social work. So really, I work from a community-based participatory action research lens. And so hopefully what I can offer you today is just really understanding how to engage with your Indigenous communities in a good way. Understanding what that impact of urban forest planning looks like, and understanding some of the values that really underpins these types of projects in our communities.
That is fabulous. And I think this is a great segue to our next question. And I'm going to turn it to Miles first, and then perhaps Peyton, I'd love to get your insights. But I think you touched on this, what is the true purpose of an urban forest management or urban forest strategy that is beyond planting trees? Like, what are the long-term outcomes that we should be aiming for?
Yeah, that's a big question. And to me, I think, the tree planting side of it is really just the start of the journey, right? I consider the urban forest management plan to be, it's a playbook of sorts that sets out a framework of predetermined projects that advance the stewardship of a particular cohort of green infrastructure assets. When we start to bring some high level tangibility to what we want to get out of it, there's a number of pillars that I think every UFMP should address in some way. And I think actually I'm going to turn to the FAO and the UN's collaboration on the tree cities of the world, the pillars that they set out in their framework to get that recognition. Really do a great job, I think, of sort of spelling out the highest level possible for what a good UFMP should look like. So, those are maybe in no particular order here. Knowing what you have, the inventory side of it, getting a baseline for, what you're working with, and being able to use a data-driven approach for canopy analysis and all the other sort of measurable aspects of asset management. Setting some rules, so some law, ordinance, or policies that, govern trees and forests in your jurisdiction. Establishing responsibility. This is the accountability piece. We need to document who's responsible for managing the urban forest and the outcomes. Allocation of resources. Again, it's really hard to have a successful urban forest program if there's literally no resources, and that's going to be a struggle for all of us, I'm sure. And then that final pillar from the Tree Cities Award is celebrating achievements. And to me, I really sort of translate this into that engagement piece here. I think the celebration of our urban forest is our best opportunity to engage with all kinds of different stakeholders out there. So for the city of Vaughan, that really translated into the 5 overarching goals that we have of our UFMP, which are, quite simply to govern the urban forest, maintain it. We need to grow the urban forest. We need to protect it, and we need to partner with our stakeholders in urban forestry in order to be successful at all of that.
That's fabulous. And I love the way that, you've connected that international lens to the local level. I think that's a really unique and meaningful approach to starting this journey. Peyton, I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I like that Miles is talking about that global perspective, because I actually want to narrow it in a little bit. Like, in terms of the work that we've done on urban forest planning or strategies, every municipality has different relationships with the Indigenous peoples around them. And it's really important to remember that all of the projects we're taking on, there is a lens of reconciliation that needs to happen in that work. And so I always see my role in urban forest planning and strategy development to really help municipalities build the relationships with Indigenous peoples, because it's important not to start off with this prescriptive intention around engagements. I think understanding that the Indigenous people, like, there's a word in my culture, in Mi'kmaq, and it comes from Albert Marshall. It's Etoweptimunk. It means two-eyed seeing. It's probably something that a lot of you have heard before as two-eyed seeing, but what that really means is converging the Western and Indigenous world. And a lot of our cultures have medicine wheel teachings that talk about the importance of all of these roles. And so I think when I hear about urban forest planning now, it's really important to bring Indigenous perspectives into that work. Indigenous people really have a history of thinking about this land. Like we mentioned at the beginning, we've been stewards of this land for a long time. And when we're thinking about urban forest planning, we're not only thinking about what's going to be important for your municipality here and now, but for the 7 generations in the future. So from that perspective of environmental social work, interventions on the land subsequently help the people. So I guess if I was to leave you with anything on that question, it's don't just draw a box and think this is what urban forest planning is. It's let that bloom and let those seeds get planted from the different partnerships you make. Because, there's that saying, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And I think that still applies to urban forest planning. Whether you engage with people or you don't, it's going to change the outcome of your planning.
That's fabulous to hear. And I think that the emphasis on being able to be flexible and tailoring to the needs is important. I think it might even answer some of the questions we've already seen pop up in a chat in terms of how to approach this. So fabulous. This is a question for Jeff and Miles. From the municipal perspective, like, what have been the major trends or pressures, for example, climate change, development, human health, that have actually influenced the way in which municipalities have approached urban forest planning today? And I'll throw this over to Jeff.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Jade. Yeah, from a climate perspective, I'll just start with a little background for those that aren't aware of the prairie cities generally, but certainly true in Saskatoon. Like, we have annual temperature fluctuations that are on the scale of 80 degrees, like plus 40 to minus 40. So we already have this very unstable conditions for growing trees. And with the early well, with signs of climate change and more dramatic change in weather patterns, particularly spring and fall, we're finding that single events can cause pretty large scale tree loss in certain parts of our community. So definitely, I mean, the diversifying our urban forest, which is heavily reliant on elm and ash at the moment, that's very, very important to mitigate the impacts of these changing conditions, unstable precipitation patterns, also more heavier and like severe rain events that don't create as much available water for trees is another factor. So stabilizing water supply for trees is a very important part of our UFMP and the work that we're doing. We've lost, in some cases, up to 5,000 trees in single events, single weather events. Also more storm response and resources dedicated to storm response, something else that we're seeing. So all of these are like very dynamic forces that are impacting our urban forest, and even like in development of the UFMP make reference to them, but couldn't really speak to the true magnitude of the impacts until those impacts are realized. So it's a real challenge in creating strategic documents that cover the wide variety of circumstances that your urban forest is going to experience, and especially true in Saskatoon, where you have these pretty unstable conditions. And the other like development pressures, we've definitely noticed, like the UFMP has been a very, very useful document in laying a foundation for internal departments working together. Capital work by Saskatoon departments at the city of Saskatoon have the biggest impact on trees in our community, far more than private development, I would say, magnitudes more. And so getting work in place that was work in place around tree protection, work in place around consistent application of compensation. These have been really useful tools in getting internal departments to the I guess to the table and speaking the same language about trees as assets and protecting them through their projects, and then paying when they don't, or requiring extensive replantings when they're unable to pay because of funding constraints. So yeah, all of those are sort of our most, like in the early stages of UFMP implementation, those are the benefits we're seeing right now.
That's great, and very comprehensive, but broad as well in terms of those benefits. Miles, is there anything that you would add on to that may be unique specifically to Vaughan?
Yeah, I think I just want to firstly highlight the importance of something Jeff said there, and that is, like, there's nothing better than the urban forest management plan exercise to bring everybody at your jurisdiction together to highlight the importance of trees as assets, right? Because we know in forestry, for those of us that are in forestry on the call here today, that's important to us, but it's not always important to everybody else, right? Trees are often just the pain in the neck that are in the way of the sidewalk getting installed, right? So just that collaboration piece offered by urban forest management planning is one of the best outcomes that we've seen so far to date. And then the last thing I'd just tackle on is one of Canada's fastest growing municipalities here in the city of Vaughan. Development pressure is huge for us, and I think for those of you that are in jurisdictions facing similar challenges, I think it's really important that we just highlight the importance of a balanced approach when it comes to urban forest management planning in the local government setting, especially because, let's face it, there are many places in Canada that are having housing crisis, housing shortages all over the place. We need to build more homes to accommodate more people a lot. And oftentimes, if that was, the business of making omelets, then the trees or the eggs that are getting broken along the way in a lot of cases, right? So just finding positive ways to and creative ways to work with the business community and the development community to find long-term sustainable practices that will really feed into, our jobs are really to look after the trees for our grandchildren at this point, right? So the decisions we make here today, and especially in our urban forest management plans, have to strike that balance between many competing priorities at your jurisdiction.
That's great. And I think this really segues to our next question around, sometimes urban forest management plans can unintentionally reinforce inequities if we're not careful. So, Peyton, Jeff, I'd love to get a sense of how your work has approached equity, not just in canopy cover, but like who is included in the journey, who benefits, and who ultimately makes those decisions. So, Peyton, maybe I'll pass it to you first.
Yeah, I love this question because if you don't come from a different worldview, you don't understand what those inequities look like. And I think that's a really big lesson that we can use as we start these urban forest plans. Our approach at pipikwan, most of you know probably about the IAP2 spectrum, the International Association of Public Participation. That spectrum, for anyone who's not familiar, sort of starts with inform, maybe moves into consult, involve, collaborate, and empower. And what I see when I start a lot of these plans is that we're just in that area of either informing or consulting. We can't get meaningful equity if we're just informing and consulting with people. So it's always our job as these planners and engagement practitioners to really try and move the needle into that involve or collaborate and sometimes even empower. I think that's where we find equity. And so, you know, just one example, when we were in Halifax doing the urban forest plan there was a lot of Indigenous people. As a Mi'kmaq person myself, not from Halifax and not from Nova Scotia, but there were things that were said to me and shared with me that weren't shared with other participants or other engagement practitioners because we come from that relational space. And there's an understanding of the way that I need to protect that knowledge and how I'm able to share that. The Black community members, for example, shared with our facilitator the importance of understanding that negative aspect of it. So although we were trying to increase canopy coverage and the municipality really had good intentions on putting more trees in their areas of residence, those tended to be actually lower socioeconomic status communities. And that would subsequently ensure that people would have higher property tax and they would actually not be able to afford those communities. And so just this understanding of engaging people to also support you in that work to create equity. I think we always try to be the ones to be the doers, but we can be the supporters and we'll find better results from that.
That's fabulous. It's definitely got my wheels turning. Jeff, do you have anything to add from Saskatoon's perspective?
Yeah, well, I guess one of the unique things about Saskatoon that, well, I don't know if it's unique to Saskatoon, but it's true in Saskatoon, that our highest canopied areas tend to be our most affluent and our least affluent neighborhoods, which is maybe not conventional tracking. I think it may be more often the case that less affluent communities tend to have lower tree cover. So our equity piece around at least canopy cover is a bit different. It tends to take I guess where we notice early inequities is around subjects like tree protection. The communities that can afford opportunity to add further protections to their city-owned trees will do so, and those that cannot are less able to. And so then from a city, we're sort of balancing these perspectives of, of course, we want to retain trees. Like an example is like injections for Dutch elm disease, and like an emerging and growing concerning problem in our city. Many in our community are interested in, bringing their private resources into protecting their city trees to a higher degree, but then to what extent do we regulate that and downregulate that to create equity within our city? That's one of the things that have popped up. For years, we've known that there's unequal access to some of our planting programs. So trying to create avenues where people can be both aware of the planting program, removing as many barriers as possible. Like just recently in a UFMP outcome, we removed the obligation to water city planted trees in front of homes in the early establishment, so we could create more equal access to that tree planting opportunity. So just for us, it's been just kind of systematically identifying barriers as we go through each of our initiatives, and then addressing some unintended consequences and trying to create a landscape where, we maintain this tree canopy in both the affluent and less affluent neighborhoods, and we're not seeing disproportionate loss as our trees are facing greater and greater challenges.
It's really fabulous. I like the fact that we've got the perspectives on the engagement as well as the implementation. And it sounds like it's a moving journey and it's not a prescriptive one as well. So that's fabulous. I'm going to jump into the next question. I'm cognizant of time, so we might need to move through these a little quicker. But Miles and Peyton, what have you learned about engaging communities that have not historically been involved in specifically the municipal forest planning process, but even maybe typically the municipal engagement process overall? And why don't we start with Miles and then we'll go to Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Jade. You know, what I've learned is that, you know, for myself, you know, I'm as an arborist first. I started as a grounds person, and I worked my way through the field, and, you know, engagement, I have to say, is the thing I learned the most about during the UFMP process. And what I learned is that it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of long range planning. It takes a lot of expertise. I think there are many aspects of urban forest planning that can be really successfully completed by forestry experts, oftentimes using in-house staff. I know a number of jurisdictions that, you know, have written wonderful urban forest management plans all on their own. The engagement part of it, however, you know, if you're not working with a highly skilled, you know, maybe corporate communications team at your jurisdiction, and I'm just going to plug in a little plug for the GCCC funding stream coming up here. If there's one thing that I really highly recommend people, you know, bring a consultant on for during the urban forest management plan process, this would be the area, because it's really hard to get people to come out. It's really hard to get people engaged. It's really challenging to formulate questions in a way that are meaningful and are going to, you know, result in meaningful connection with the communities, and all kinds of different communities. And you know, we had to make a couple pivots along the way with our engagement on our plan, but I think just be prepared to hit the, you know, you got to hit the ground running really hard on the engagement side of it. And I'm really interested to see what Peyton can bring into this question as well.
You know what? I love that you're saying that, because I actually don't think it's that hard. I think we paint this picture that it's that hard, but it's because our approach is always to put out information and expect people to pick it up. And we lose this idea of relational work. When we work from that relational space, it's not hard to get people to contribute. Just think about this. If your friend called you up today and said, "Hey, I really want you to contribute to this urban forest plan in our community. Can I come have tea with you? And can we chat about that?" That's how we do our work. I'm going to add a link into the chat for you. An article that we use a lot at pipikwan is about pêhtâkwan, the visiting way. And, you know, your question, Jade, like, how is it working with communities that have historically not been involved, whether that's engagement or urban forest planning? The truth is people are not going to engage with you if they don't have a relationship, or they're not like the most passionate people about that topic. So everything starts with relationship first, and then the work can happen next. And so thinking about that in your planning really can help you phase out that work more strategically. How am I visiting with people? How am I starting those conversations, those relationships, which are more reciprocal from an Indigenous lens than from a Western lens? How can I learn about your community just as much as you're learning from my work in urban forestry? And Indigenous communities are overworked and we are underfunded. Everybody wants Indigenous communities to contribute to their work, and it feels like a checkbox. So if you haven't come from that relational space yet, and you don't know what the community priorities are, you're going to have a hard time. So I think really building those relationships is how you get that work done. And the truth is that they're probably already doing things. Like, they are not, you know, whatever the community might be, whatever the group is, they are not isolated from the urban forest. We live in this area, right? We live in the community. We engage with the urban forest in many different ways. And so thinking about, you know, Jeff, you were talking about a tree giveaway or a plant giveaway program and how you're trying to reduce the barriers. I think that is the responsibility of a municipality to do that. But I also think when we look at this engagement approach differently, people are already able to do those things or willing to do those things. So potentially switch your matrix. You know, we're thinking about success from this quantitative perspective all the time. How many trees did you know, Saskatoon giveaway, 1,000 trees, that's great success. But what if that matrix was, how many relationships did we build with organizations that started their own tree giveaway program? You don't have to be the doers. I think in our urban forest work and when we're pitching these things to council, we want to show them how we're doing the work rather than how we are supporting the work being done by others. And Indigenous communities are more than happy and probably would prefer to create that program with maybe some economic support, maybe some resource support in kind, than it would be for you to try and go out and create a program that Indigenous people wanted to be a part of. So thinking about shifting that lens a little.
Absolutely love this. Shifting the lens, building in more engagement, being more flexible. However, we do know that urban forest work often gets sidelined in budget or land use decisions. So I'm going to throw this to Miles and Jeff. With all of these considerations for engagement, like, what helped you frame the strategy's value in ways that resonate with councillors, engineers, or finance teams? And I'm also going to throw in those considerations for engagement. Miles, why didn't you go? Oh, no, actually, Jeff, let's bring it back to you.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, thanks, Jade. Yeah, this question is very interesting. I've had a fairly long municipal career, and to this point, I hope it continues. And the one thing I think I am learning is that having a council that is mindful and values green infrastructure is extremely important. Trying to convince a council that isn't as mindful of the value of green infrastructure is very, very difficult. So I think for us, it's been about aligning the resources and the timing for when you get the council that is friendly towards the initiative. It sounds maybe a bit cynical, I don't know, but it's like, but hitting on that timing is very important. We've had a wonderful council, a council that supported our urban forest so much over the last now it's 3 consecutive terms, and we've been able to do so much at that time. It was very challenging for us in the worlds prior to that. And then once you have the plan approved, you are in a great position to implement the initiatives of the plan. So I think the timing with respect to the opinions of your council is very, very important. I would say with engineers, like I don't know why, but for whatever reason, the collective consciousness with respect to trees has risen. And now we're sitting down with engineers who have a far greater appreciation for trees and the values they provide than in prior conversations, certainly at the beginning of my career. And I don't know all the reasons for that, but it seems like there is just a genuine interest in wanting to preserve trees that are there, add more to plans than at previous times in the past. And one last thing I'll add, which Miles, in an earlier answer, you kind of just triggered this in my mind. Council will readily, in our example at least, they'll readily approve plans in principle that are on a collision course. We approve an active transportation plan. It sounds great on the face of it, but it actually is in a direct collision course with the urban forest management plan, because it means sidewalks, it means wider sidewalks, it means accessible sidewalks, which all mean potential tree loss. So they will do both of those things very readily. But when we, like through creation of our own UFMP, do a lot of internal engagement, we then increase the chances that we're going to be engaged with when they develop their plans and their steering plans. And these two working together, unavoidably there'll be conflict, but working together at the outset can resolve and at least smooth the edges of the conflict a lot. So something you said earlier, Miles, kind of reminded me of that working and just making sure you're on the plan of or associated with the teams on each plan that the city develops.
Fabulous. We're getting really tight for time, so Miles, in 10 seconds or so, is there anything you would add to that from a budget side of things?
Yeah, I think I'm going to actually bring back the relationship piece that Peyton was speaking about. I think this is the strongest, thing that we need to be good at, especially when it comes to budgets, funny enough. So that relationship with council, The 10-second pitch here would be, don't forget that our job number one every day when we come in as municipal administrators is to be of service to people, not of trees, right? So if we can frame everything in how we are benefiting the actual communities and not the necessarily the tree populations out there. So one really quick example, we don't cycle prune because it's benefiting the urban forest. We're cycle pruning because it's good customer service and it's a more efficient, tax productive way of maintaining the urban forest. And we have to pitch it as resident first. The trees have to take a backseat, especially when it comes to financial conversations.
That's fabulous. And thank you for summarizing that so concisely, but so impactfully. Just for folks on the line, like we will be moving into the Q&A section very shortly. So please start to drop your questions and give you a thumbs up. And Rita, I see you sharing the screen, but we're not quite there yet. We're still going through the Q&A just as a heads up, but we're going to jump into our next question. I'd like to, very quickly, if everyone can give me like 2 bullets, co-benefits. And Miles, maybe I'll put you on the spot, like 2 co-benefits, unintended co-benefits of your urban forest strategy.
Yeah, I think, again, big thread through the conversation here today on the engagement piece. So our 5th goal is all about engagement with the community, making partnerships in our community to help support the urban forest. One of the newest initiatives that we've launched since endorsement of our urban forest management plan is community tree planting events. So, leaning into our responsibility to provide a place for people to roll up their sleeves and help. And, we've been doing it for about 1.5 years now. And I don't know why, but I'll never stop being surprised at the amount of passionate people that are just coming out of the woodworks to help support us. And we know it's just the beginning. We also have a woodland management strategy that was landed at the same time, and there's going to be a lot of community engagement opportunities around that as well. So it was a big, pleasant surprise, knowing that if we sort of take that field of dreams strategy, and if we build them the opportunities, they will come out and support.
That's fabulous. Jeff, do you have like 2 bullets that you could add to the co-benefits that
yeah, I mean, on the face of it, sounds very similar to what Miles indicated. Like there's been a lot more community involvement in all of our initiatives, like spilling out from the UFMP. Our community planting initiatives get higher participation rates, and there's many more of them than there were previously. We're seeing surprising and unique co-benefits related to integration with community standards and our tree protection processes. There's a number of ways in which I guess I'm almost on a weekly basis surprised by the ways in which people are using or applying our tree protection bylaw in unexpected ways. Yeah, I don't know. I think for the most part, it's been increased community involvement in all of our initiatives.
Perfect. And Peyton, anything you would add from a co-benefit side?
Yeah, I think the idea of innovation comes to my mind about, when I said about Etowaptumunk, that 2-eyed seeing, we learn more by doing these approaches and by taking on this work. And to be honest with you, it's kind of an easy sell. So like that's a co-benefit. People love nature, people love trees. And so I think you can really find a lot of innovation in the way that you're doing work.
That's absolutely fabulous. In 60 seconds or less, Miles, Jeff, Peyton and Jeff, once the plan is approved, then what? What tools, what partnership structures will help move strategy into action? Maybe there's just a couple of bullets you could throw out there. Peyton, yeah. I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, for us, it's really important actually to do capacity building with the partners that we take on and the projects that we do, because the truth is you don't always need an Indigenous person to do this work. You should be and could be able to do it. So a lot of what we do is really making sure that we're building capacity and relationship building, making sure that the municipality is involved in that. And I would say once the plan is also approved, I always caution people to think about OCAP, the ownership, control, access, and possession, which are First Nation data sovereignty principles. It's really important that you think about that at the front, because when you're taking a plan from strategy into implementation, Indigenous people who have contributed to that are still owners of the knowledge that they've contributed. And so we want to make sure that we're maintaining those relationships so that we can understand what that application looks like.
Fabulous. Jeff, anything you would add to that?
I mean, for me, it's, and this sounds like the fox in the hen house here, but it's like get someone on the plan. If you don't have someone on the plan, it will collect dust very, very quickly and then fall into the dustbin of a series of other municipal plans that never get, they never are actionable. And doing it by committee or taking operational jobs and putting it on the corner of their desk, at least in the my experience with the Saskatoon situation, has not been successful. Like you need some resourcing there, otherwise it falls pretty flat pretty fast.
That's really helpful advice. This is bringing us to our last question. So again, folks, encourage you to throw your questions in the chat. We will have a little bit of time. And I'm going to throw this question to all three of you. If you had a magic wand to introduce one policy or funding change that would unlock better urban forest planning, what would it be? Miles, you're up first.
I think just waving the wand of ensuring that the right hand is always talking to the left hand within your team, and the bigger team at the city. Jeff talked a little bit about this at the beginning, but getting everybody at that table and all the transparency, it's hard to always know what's going on around the trees, and not everybody cares. So that would be my one, quick, easy magic wand wave.
That's fabulous. Jeff, what's your genie wish here?
Yeah, if it's a genie wish, I have to make the one slightly more powerful. It's not a policy or funding change, but in my case, it's increasing the depth and breadth of arboricultural experience in and around our city. We don't have schools to recruit from. We really struggle with recruitment. We don't tend to lack funding. We tend to lack the knowledge and experience in that in the arboricultural field, and that's creates real challenges for us.
That's a really interesting one. Thanks, Jeff. And Peyton.
You know what? I had a different one, but Pascal just made a good note in the chat about, this being a collection of trees, not necessarily a forest. So my policy change is actually to stop friggin' calling it urban forests because it's so confusing to people who aren't in urban forestry. I think like 90% of the first thing I have to do with communities is really define an urban forest as all the natural space. And so I would love to see that language change. Jeff, you talked about common language. I'd love to see a language change that really allows everybody to participate in the naturalization of spaces. But I mean, I would also probably include some funding for ceremony because that's not a question that the Western world asks at the beginning of projects, but it's one that Indigenous communities always ask, how are we starting in ceremony? So change the language and give you some money for ceremony.
I love that. All right, we're going to thank you so much for answering all the questions. I think we could have made this easily a half-day session and we'd still have questions that we'd want to pick your brain about. But I want to spend a couple of minutes moving to the Q&A. And we have a couple in the chat. And if folks want to go in and answer as well, feel free. But I'm actually going to jump straight to Angela's question here around combining urban forest management with biodiversity. And maybe this touches a little bit on Pascal's comment. So real quickly, what are your thoughts of combining the two versus separating them? And maybe like Miles, I'm going to throw this into you.
Sorry, combining urban forest management planning with which, sorry, Jade?
A biodiversity strategy.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely go hand in hand, right? Like a biodiversity strategy, I think, they're not the same strategic thinking, that's for sure. But urban forest management planning without very strong consideration for biodiversity as one of the biggest sort of risk management elements that I would say when it comes to urban forests specifically. It's you can't do it without it essentially, and it's one of the easy to me one of the easier sort of elements to put some thought into, strategically thinking what does biodiversity mean in urban forestry specifically, get some policies in place and, plan the work the plan, right? In terms of operationalizing biodiversity thinking.
That's great. So building in that flexibility. I'm going to throw this next question over to Peyton. I know you already answered it in the chat, but I think it's worthwhile the folks hearing this. There was a question here around commenting on the way that visiting way relations is really important when it comes to meaningfully engaging with Indigenous community members. However, as consultants engaging in UFMP, quite often limited by available budget and individualized engagements. Do you have any advice on how we can better demonstrate the value to municipal decision makers of investing in this depth of engagement and encourage project budgets to reflect the true costs of this approach?
Yeah, I think the other two actually touched on this from that more municipal standpoint. So I think what I would encourage you to do is actually paint it as a risk also. Because if you don't engage with Indigenous communities, we are sovereign nations. We are all treaty people and we all have treaty responsibilities. You're actually putting your municipality at risk by not engaging with Indigenous communities. And so I think there's that piece of it. But Jeff talked about one of those outcomes as being maybe you're going to end up getting engaged from other areas in the municipality. And so I actually see it as you're able to sort of paint this as a picture of reconnection and integration rather than the fragmentation that happens. At the front end of a project, the truth is, if you can't invest in it, there's just a different investment, right? It's either time or funding. And so you may have an Indigenous Relations office that's also able to co-sponsor this work. Actually, across many of the municipalities that we've worked at, their Indigenous Relations office has created specific funding practices and specific pots of money for urban forest work or for Indigenous projects. And so there might be individuals you can partner with inside of that. But I think the truth is it's responsibility. And so if I have to tell you why reconciliation is important, then maybe you're not ready to be there, right? So assess your council in that sense. If they're not at the stage of understanding why it's a treaty responsibility, you may have a harder time, but the investment is more time than it is money. It's just about being more flexible with how you visit and rather than setting up 10 or 12 different public engagement sessions, it's about making a phone call and saying, hey, I'd really love to chat with you about this. Do you have time for me to come visit your community, or do you want to do a virtual chat? Like, how can we do that? So there's definitely some approaches, and if you are in need of doing that, you can definitely connect with an Indigenous consultant to build some capacity on your team to take some of that financial burden away.
That's fabulous. Thank you, Peyton. The last comment I have, it's more of a comment than a question, but for folks, we had an amazing translator help me out here, but I just want to highlight the comment from Miriam in that, and it's a topic that I'm deeply passionate about too, is that it also may be relevant to talk and be accompanied by people working in the risks of climate change on municipal property and infrastructure and who work for insurance companies. They know the problematic patterns in planning and their costs in other cities. And there's an additional argument for investing in green infrastructure through that climate lens. So considering adopting and habit practices of using the term canopy as infrastructure to manage sewers, avoid flooding, mixed teams with planning, forestry, engineering, and roads to co-design and improve ways of doing things to achieve an excellent result. And I felt that that kind of ties everything really together that we've been talking about. I want to say thank you so much to Miles, Jeff, and Peyton. I know I've personally learned a whole bunch about your journeys and your perspectives, and I want to just run away now and integrate all of these thoughts into the work that I do on a daily basis, so I'm excited for that. I also want to make a final plug for the workshop that we have coming up, and I don't know if we have an extra slide for that one. There we go. Thank you so much to our great technical team. So we do have an upcoming workshop on how to create an urban forest management plan. It's taking place on August 21st, and it is with partners Diamond Head Consulting, I believe, are leading this workshop, and you'll get the hands-on opportunity to learn how to develop an urban forest management plan for your community. This will go into more detail. It will talk about how to set those priorities and start creating a bit of a roadmap to get you started. So to sign up, please use the QR code. You can also visit the GMF website for more information. But with this, I want to, recognizing we're at 2:00 on the dot here in Ontario, thank everybody for your participation. Hope to see your applications short and soon in the GCCC funding streams, and look forward to bumping into you somewhere in the forest. Have a great day. Oh, and please don't forget to do your post-survey poll at the end before you log off, because I will get in trouble if you don't. So thank you. Enjoy your afternoon, and take care.